Continue our meditation on the Westminster Confession of Faith in the section on God's covenant with man, chapter 7. Look at section 6 of that chapter, which reads as follows. Under the gospel, when Christ the substance was exhibited, the ordinances in which this covenant is dispensed are the preaching of the word and the administration of the sacraments of baptism and the Lord's Supper, which, though few in number and administered with more simplicity and less outward glory, yet in them it is held forth in more fullness, evidence, and spiritual efficacy to all nations, both Jews and Gentiles, and is called the New Testament. There are not, therefore, two covenants of grace, differing in substance, but one and the same under various dispensations. Last time we reflected on the Old Covenant made under Moses with Israel in the wilderness, in which a temple was established, a variety of rituals developed to symbolize God's covenant with His people. They were obligated under the law to obey God, and where there was sin, there was provision of the temple and its sacrifices to atone for sin, or at least symbolically to do so. The offerings themselves, the temple ritual, was only a copy of the heavenly one, so it was a shadow of the greater reality that was above. The Old Covenant people therefore lived in the shadows of the Old Covenant economy. They had a glimpse of the greater glory that was above. But it was only a glimpse. In and of itself, it was not the real thing. Its only value was that it pointed forward to something of greater significance. And that has come with Jesus Christ. He has come to fulfill all the Old Covenant temple and rituals, fulfill even the law of Moses for us, which we ourselves could not fulfill on our own. So everything under the Old Covenant law finds its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. He is the great high priest of the people of God, who brings into the greater temple, heaven above, an offering which is once for all and fully sufficient to completely atone for all of our sins. He is the lamb that is offered for us. His offering on the cross was the one sacrifice for our sins that truly atones for sins. So all the Old Covenant rituals pointed to this great work of Christ on the cross, whereby He bore the penalty for our sins and made us new. We live in the period of substance and of reality. Not all has been revealed. We yet to receive the greater fullness that is to come in Jesus, but now we have substance as compared to shadows and types under the Old Covenant ceremonies. The ordinances of this new covenant are changed from the Old Covenant. The Old Covenant was given to Israel, a nation, in a particular location. There were rituals and types that were given for a particular purpose and time. In this new covenant period of time, things have changed. The gospel is no longer confined to the Old Covenant, to one nation, the children of Abraham, but extends to the nations of the earth. The ordinances that accompany this new covenant are therefore suited to this new covenant age. They are simple in that they may be observed in many locations all around the world, in poor locations and in wealthy locations. They are simple in that there are simply two: baptism by water and the communion service with bread and wine. These two ordinances might seem rather simple and meager in comparison to a glorious temple like Solomon's temple of old, or Herod's great temple, which was built in Jerusalem, which had great crowds gathering to meet there. What is there to compare between that and a little bit of bread and wine, or a little sprinkling of water upon the head of a child or an adult? It seems to be no comparison. But these ordinances in the New Covenant are of far greater significance. because they tell us of a redemption that is completed in Jesus Christ, not merely pictured and anticipated under the Old Covenant temple and rituals, but completed and fulfilled in the death of Christ. We see exactly what God has done to make that salvation possible in the death of Christ. And so those outward elements of baptism and the Lord's Supper are spiritual signs and seals of the covenant of grace given to us, and of far greater worth to us than empty shadows and types, even though those shadows and types were given of old under inspiration of God. They were limited and for time. And so we have this greater spiritual efficacy given to us in these new covenant sacraments, baptism and the Lord's Supper, extending to all nations. One final note that we should observe here from the confession is that we now have not two covenants of grace, the one under the Old Covenant with its own ritual and temple and so forth, given to Israel and simply located towards Israel, and then a separate covenant given to the church under a new covenant period of time, simply given to the church with different rituals and so forth. No, it's one covenant through and through, from Old Covenant to New Covenant. What we have is like the development of a plant that breaks from its shell, rises up from the ground, goes through various transformations until it becomes a full tree. And then in spring, its blossoms come, they break through the buds, and soon fruit arrives in this glorious manifestation of God's grace and favor. The Old Covenant comes to us in elementary form, in symbols and types, but it grows over time and becomes a flourishing tree under the New Covenant, with all of its richness and grace, with all of its nourishment and fruitfulness. And so it's one covenant, administered in different ways under the Old Covenant to the New Covenant, but one manifestation of grace, all focused on Jesus Christ and His cross. The Old Covenant pointed ahead to that. The New Covenant, we look back to that. But everything focuses on Jesus Christ and His cross. That's at the heart of God's covenant of grace. And it's one covenant through and through.